We
That
made
was a good
it.
phrase. Short-term gain at the expense of long-term health.
Yeah, write it down.
Good, good for, I'll use my word, I'll whiteboard. Hit me, producer Potts.
We typically seek out diets because we're looking to achieve health related goals, but I would not ever put nutrient insufficiencies in that column as it's not something I can see, feel, or that I would ever track. Why is eating to address nutrient insufficiency so important?
I love this question so much. So let's start with explaining what the difference is between nutrient deficiency and nutrient insufficiency. Because I think those terms are often like misunderstood exactly what they mean. And they're both scary, but they're scary in different ways. And we're not in the fear-mongering business over here. So we're going to explain this in a way that gives lots of like action steps for how to address this if you're concerned. So nutrient deficiency refers to usual intake of an essential nutrient being so low that it causes a disease of malnutrition. So think scurvy from very, very low intake of vitamin C, or rickets from very, very low vitamin D levels during growth. When you have vitamin D deficiency as an adult, it doesn't cause rickets, but it does cause a lot of vague symptoms like fatigue and headaches and muscle, joint pain, and just like malaise. There's other diseases of nutrient deficiency, goiter, which is an enlarged thyroid gland that can be caused by iodine deficiency. There's beriberi, pellagra, night blindness, which can be caused by vitamin A deficiency. So those are all like, we've got so low levels of this nutrient in our bodies that the wheels are falling off the cart. So we've got this disease of malnutrition, and they're generally reversible by supplying that nutrient. Not necessarily all of the symptoms fully reversible, depending on exactly what we're talking about. Like megaloblastic anemia, I think, is the one that's not fully reversible out of the B vitamin driven anemias. So there's sometimes situations like if you have scurvy and lose some teeth, we're not gonna grow those teeth back, right? But the progression of the disease is going to stop as soon as we start adding back in enough of that nutrient. So that is what deficiency refers to, right? It is a disease of malnutrition caused by very low levels of a single essential nutrient, right? All of those are one-to-one. Scurvy is vitamin C, rickets is vitamin D, beriberi is vitamin B1. I say with not a lot of confidence. I'm pretty sure beriberi is B1 and pellagra is vitamin B3, but I might have those backwards. Insufficiency refers to usual intake of that essential nutrient being below the recommended dietary intake. So below the daily value, right? Below how much we're pretty sure most people need, but above the threshold that would cause these like diseases of deficiency where the wheels fall off the cart. So above the level where we go, like, yeah, that causes scurvy. So for vitamin C, as the example, the daily value, like how much we need, is 90 milligrams per day for adult males and 75 milligrams per day for adult females. That's how much is a target for us. But we only need 10 milligrams per day to prevent scurvy. So insufficiency refers to that weird gray between 10 and 75 for females and 90 for males, for adults. So it's I'm not getting as much as my body needs. I'm not there yet, but it's not so low that the wheels are falling off the cart. And the reason why we are concerned about dietary insufficiency, we can refer to it as a dietary shortfall of those nutrients. There's other terms we can use, like we're just not getting enough, right? We're not getting enough, but it's not terrible. The reason why we're concerned about that is that that increases the risk of just about everything that can go wrong health-wise. So every biological system in our bodies, think cardiovascular system, immune system, digestive system, musculoskeletal system, every system in our body has a collection of nutritional resources that it needs to do its job. So nutrients are building blocks, so the things that we are made of, but they're also the things that go into a chemical reaction or that facilitate a chemical reaction that is important for life, right? So we are have trillions of chemical reactions in every moment, right? Like there's all kinds of different this turning into this and this becoming this that is part of what makes us and that keeps us alive. And nutrients are what are needed for those chemical reactions. And I don't just mean energy. So I don't just mean protein, carbs, and fat, the things that help to supply energy for those chemical reactions. But vitamins tend to be what are called cofactors, and minerals too, right? They tend to not necessarily be like used up in a chemical reaction, although they certainly can, but they tend to be things that help that chemical reaction happen, right? So they tend to be things that are necessary for that chemical reaction to happen. And because nutritional resources are used up in all of these different chemical reactions of life, that's why we need to top up our stores daily, or at least most days, from the foods we eat. So every biological system has nutrients that it needs in order to do its job. When we have a nutrient insufficiency, so we're just not quite getting enough for the cardiovascular system to do all of the great blood pumping things that the cardiovascular system does, it adds to other things that can put wear and tear and strain on that system. So it is adding another stress, another thing that's making that system have to work a little bit harder. It might change a chemical reaction to produce a product that's not as good, or make a chemical reaction produce less of a product. It might help stop a byproduct that's not great from being properly like recycled. Like there's all different ways that not having enough nutrients can impact how a biological system is functioning. And unlike the disease of deficiency, where we know exactly what's happening with not enough vitamin C that's causing scurvy, it's in the collagen production and maintenance of collagen tissues, and that's what causes the symptoms of scurvy, because vitamin C is necessary for, it's a necessary cofactor, something that helps with the chemical reactions for collagen production. So that's how the thread pulls together. But so when we're not getting enough of those nutrients, it adds a stressor to that system that then interacts with genetics and epigenetics, social determinants of health, diet and lifestyle, other health-related behaviors like whether or not we smoke or drink, interacts with our access to medical care. All of those things together then increase our risk for cardiovascular disease or cancer or type 2 diabetes or chronic kidney disease or Alzheimer's disease, like you name it, even an infectious disease. So every chronic disease has multiple nutrient associations, and every nutrient has multiple health problem associations, where not getting enough of that nutrient increases risk. It's not, I didn't get enough vitamin C and I'm doomed to get scurvy. It's not a direct line, but it is a factor in a collection of factors that is a clear point of intervention. So when we can supply our body with all of the nutrients that our bodies need, it turns down the risk of all of these health problems. Doesn't turn it off. We still have risk because diet plus lifestyle only accounts for 40 to 50% of health outcomes, and the remaining is things that are largely outside of our control. But it is a really clear point of like, if I can make sure that I'm getting all of the nutrients that my cardiovascular system needs to function, I'm going to reduce my risk of cardiovascular disease. And then just repeat that statement for all of the other possible health conditions. So the reason why we worry about nutrient insufficiencies is because it increases the likelihood of something bad happening. But because it's not a deficiency, it's not the wheels falling off the cart, it's not my gums bleeding and my teeth falling out, it's really hard to know. The symptoms, yes, first of all, there can be no symptoms. Sometimes we have no idea we're short on nutrients until someone runs a blood test, and there's not even tests for every nutrient shortfall. So that complicates matters. Like we can't just,
and they can be really expensive too.
they can be, they're not necessarily covered. And so there's certain tests, right? Like if I test your serum potassium levels, that measures how well your kidneys are working, not whether or not you're getting enough potassium, right? So there's certain tests that you would think oh, my blood doctor tested the potassium. My doctor did a blood test that tested the potassium is what I meant to say, but I guess there are hematologists, blood doctors. Anyways, it tested my potassium. My potassium was normal. I should be fine, right? We have this like false sense of security because nobody's explaining to us what these tests are really measuring, unless you have a really great communicative doctor. And I'm so happy for you if you do. So we don't even have tests for a lot of these nutrient shortfalls. So we don't even know until the big symptoms come up. Like you can get low blood potassium from low intake of potassium. It just takes a really long time and really low levels of potassium. And then badness, like hospitalization level badness from being hypokalemic, it's called. So it's really hard to know. And often the symptoms are, I'm tired, I have a bit of a headache, I'm stiff, right? Like it's just things that we so easily brush off to, I didn't get enough sleep last night, or I'm a little bit stressed, or I'm fighting something off, right? Like we don't draw the line in our heads between how we're feeling and I'm not getting enough of some nutrients, but I'm not really short. I'm just not quite getting as much as my body wants.
And can I try an analogy and you can let me know if it's good or not?
Okay. I like that.
I was just thinking of this while you were talking. So a lot of us see food as like enjoyment and pleasure and all that, but then there's also the point of this whole idea as food as fuel. Yeah. So like if our bodies were a car, that's the fuel. But the more I hear you talk about that stuff, it's not just the gasoline. Yep. It's the antifreeze, it's the water, it's the air in our tires, it's the wear and tear on our brakes, it's the oil, it's the oil, it's like all the things that, the car still works, and eventually over time something might happen, but like that's why we keep our fluids topped off, that's why we check the air pressure in our tires. And I think I'm just now having an epiphany moment of like, oh, it's food is like so much more than just giving our bodies energy, which I think we're all very aware of thanks to our overabundance of knowledge of this, thanks to diet culture. We know like food is energy, but to think about it in the terms of all these nutrients, in the fact that there are all these different systems that use them all in our body, and like we need to top off those sources. So if there's not like really good tracking, like with testing, you
can't just measure the oil and see if you need to top it up.
You can't just measure the oil. But there are these like free apps online we can use. Are those useful? Like, does that help us? Yeah.
Yeah. So first of all, I have to say, excellent analogy, 10 out of 10.
Yay.
I think it's fantastic. So think of the gasoline as your protein, carbs, and fat, like your macros. Like, did you put gas in the car? So if you didn't put gas in the car won't run, right?
Right.
But it's not the only thing your car needs. And think of vitamins and minerals and phytonutrients as all of those other little things that you mentioned. Think of all of those things also like getting your maintenance every 5,000 miles or 6 months or whatever, right? Like all of the other essential nutrients that we need is everything else that the car needs to continue running. And think of it like it's maybe you let the oil run low on an old car, but then also there was a lot of like salt on the road and that corroded some things, and like multiple little things can go wrong with the car, and that can make the car not run, right? It's not always just one thing. They can kind of interact. It was like, oh yeah, no, the spark plug, something. I don't know a whole lot about how cars work.
Me neither, but I know there's a lot of things we have to pay attention to, or our mechanics do.
So I would say I think that's an excellent analogy. So how do you know if you're nutrient insufficient? Well, first of all, almost everyone is. So the scary statistics, let me pull out. This is in like chapter 1 of my book, because part of Nutrivore is why should we care, right? Like that's basically what this whole book is about. Like why care about nutrients, and then also like how to get more of them, right? But in the why care about nutrients, chapter 1, this is citing data from a 2011 study, which I really like this study in part because they had a lot of data to go through, but they also did separate analysis on different age groups of people, and they also did separate analysis on whether nutrients were coming from food, fortified foods, or supplements. And I
Oh,
think that's
okay.
really important because when you incorporate supplements, we know that the nutrients from supplements don't yield the same expected outcome, at least for multivitamins, as it does as when we get those nutrients from food. So I think it's really important to just look at how much nutrient we're getting from food. So this is looking at adults. So this is over the age of 18, I believe. So 100% of us don't get enough vitamin D from our food. We can not get too freaked out about that because we also make our own vitamin D in response to the sun, and how important it is to get it from food is not really clear. So we can put vitamin D in a kind of a separate pile. But separately from that study, there are estimates that 75% of Americans are vitamin D deficient or insufficient, which means the levels in our blood are low. So vitamin D is still a top one. But like we don't need to freak out about that 100% number. But this one maybe we do. 97.8% of Americans don't hit the adequate intake level of potassium, which increases risk of kidney problems, osteoporosis, and cardiovascular disease. Right?
Okay. Wow.
That's basically almost all of us. Then 96.2% of us don't get enough vitamin E, which is the main fat soluble antioxidant in our bodies. 90.2% of us don't get enough vitamin B9, which is folate. 80.1% of us don't get enough vitamin A. 72.4% of us don't get enough vitamin K. 66.3% of us don't get enough magnesium. 56.3% of us don't get enough vitamin B1. 54.9% of us don't get enough calcium, and 52% of us don't get enough vitamin C. I've got other nutrients on this chart with less than 50%,
Wow.
percentages of people who don't get enough. But that means there's 10, if we count vitamin D, which again, maybe we don't need to, 10 essential nutrients for which half or more of Americans are routinely not getting enough of from their diet. And that study didn't look at fiber, which there's estimates that it's like 90 to 95% of us don't get enough fiber. Like there's other things that weren't even in that study, right? That weren't
Right.
measured. So something like 10 essential nutrients for which half or more of us aren't getting enough of from our diet, 4 essential nutrients for which 90% of us are not getting enough from our diet. And again, our intake isn't so low that we're developing a disease of deficiency. There aren't actually diseases of deficiency that are determined for all of those. But like, for example, folate is one of the really important nutrients in prenatal vitamins because it reduces the risk of neural tube defects. So sometimes it's not necessarily your health that would be impacted, but maybe the health of your unborn child. So like it's a big deal that so few of us are actually getting all of the nutrients our bodies need. I think it makes it very unlikely that there are very many people who are actually getting everything they need, right? Like
Right.
that's I literally say you might be the like magic rainbow unicorn who's getting everything you need from the food you eat, but I'll hedge my bets based on those statistics. Like those statistics mean chances are really good that you're missing out on something. So
Right.
to your follow-up question, which is these free tracking apps, right? Chronometer or MyFitnessPal, there's a bunch that are like that. Are they a good tool? And my answer is yes. Like tracking is not for everybody. I don't like tracking. I've done it for extended periods of time in the past because it's been important for me for developing some healthy habits. But I didn't like it when I did it. And there's some people for whom tracking can be very triggering of disordered eating patterns. So like if tracking is not a good tool for you, I will give you an alternative after this.
Oh, I love that.
But for people who just don't like it, using these apps to just log your food And then look at, because it'll ask for some demographic data. So it'll have a recommended dietary intake that's based on your age and biological sex, and like whether or not you're pregnant or lactating. So there's different targets for those different demographics. So it'll show you graphically how close to hitting the daily value you are. Did you go over a little bit, which is fine? Did you go over a lot? That might, depending on what nutrient we're talking about, that might not be safe. And then you can kind of just have a gauge. I would recommend, we call this temperature gauge tracking. So it's just like taking the temperature, right? Like, where am I at? I recommend doing this for 2 to 3 days and then looking at the average. Did I hit all of my vitamins, all of my minerals, fiber, protein? Did I hit it like on average? Did I average 100% or more of the daily value of those things? If yes, great. If no, you can look at top food sources of those nutrients online, come over to Nutrivore, go look at the article for that nutrient, and all of the best food sources will be listed at the bottom of that article. I also have an ebook called Top 25 Foods for Every Nutrient that gives you 2 different food lists for 42 nutrients. That's all the best sources. So that's another great resource. So look at the ones that you're falling short on, and then go have a look at like what types of foods are good sources, and then figure out how to incorporate more of those foods, right? And then in a couple months, you can do another one for a couple of days and see, did I successfully up my vitamin E and my calcium? If, oh yeah, yep, it's great, then I don't need to do anything else. Oh, hey, man, those are still short. Okay, was I adding enough dairy products and nuts and seeds, which would be the calcium and the vitamin E foods? Okay, let me see what else I can tweak, right? So we don't need to track every single day, but that can be a really good way for gauging dietary insufficiency. That weird gray between I'm not actually getting enough, but it's not so low that it's causing major health problems right now. So
Right.
that weird gray, the best way to identify that is with a food journal, where you just put everything in. I wish there was a way to hide calories from those food journals. I think it's a massive flaw that you can't. But again, because I know that that number can be very triggering. So if you're a person for whom the numbers are really triggering, or the logging of it is really triggering, I recommend kind of doing what they do in medical studies, where they ask you to recall what you ate over the last few days. You can do it as you go if that's not gonna like be really onerous, but just think about what did I eat yesterday? Write it down. With you don't even need to necessarily write down precise amounts. Like you can get a temperature gauge tracking with rough estimates. So you can even use the handy dandy serving size estimates that we use over here, where a fist is about 1 cup, right? The volume of your fist is about 1 cup. The top segment of your thumb is about a tablespoon, right? So the cupped palm of your hand is about a 1/4 cup. So you can use those types of estimates to just write it down. And then if you want, so some people will be able to like write everything down and put everything in at once, and it's not as triggering. So if that's you, great. So just write it down as you go. And then after you've done 3 days of just writing down your food, either thinking about it at the end of the day or writing about it as you go throughout the day, then put it all in and see where you're at. If that's not too triggering for you, if it is, give it to someone else. Give it to a spouse or a kid who loves to learn about data entry, or have a consultation with a registered dietitian or a certified nutritionist, right? Who can then look at your food log and do that analysis with whatever their preferred tool is. So there's ways that you can shield yourself from the triggering part of that exercise, but still get the important data point of, I need to eat more vitamin E rich foods, right? Or
Right.
calcium rich foods. And then you can figure that out. I would love to have a better tool than those for you. I have ideas if you would like to support the development of that tool. The best way to do that right now is to join my Patreon and show your support for Nutrivore and the resources we're creating. Alternatively, you could go grab a copy of my book, which has tons of great information, or grab a digital resource from nutrivore.com/shop. And if none of those things are accessible for you, but you still want to support, you can lend moral and algorithmic support by following, liking, engaging, commenting. Just being part of the conversation is also a great way to support the work that we're doing, because I would love to have a way to be able to offer people that information that doesn't feel like tracking and doesn't trigger all of the negative emotions associated with diet tracking apps, which really tend to overfocus on what you shouldn't eat rather than did I meet my nutritional needs, which is what we're trying to answer with that question.
Right, exactly. Wow, this is a lot. And I think it's like, I mean, it's heavy. Like, okay, yep, probably not getting enough nutrients, but with what I'm learning from your book and using the serving matrix myself, I feel like I'm probably doing good, but I actually haven't tracked. So maybe I need to do that and kind of just see where I am with things. But
Temperature
it'll
gauge
be,
tracking is a
yeah,
really useful experiment, even if you're somebody who uses the Nutrivore Weekly Serving Matrix. But also remember that the math that I did to develop the Nutrivore Weekly Serving Matrix, which is for people who aren't familiar, it's daily and weekly serving targets from a bunch of different food families with a lot of room to like round out with whatever you want. But it's basically a way to expedite the goal of getting all of the nutrients our bodies need from the foods we eat. That math that I did in developing that, and the huge like survey of the scientific literature, like the huge amount of work that went into developing those serving guidelines, that does greatly increase the likelihood that if you're falling short of anything, you're falling short by a very small and probably not meaningful amount. It greatly increases the likelihood that you are getting everything that your body needs, because that is the calculus that went into creating that. So,
right.
so that's another alternative. If you're like, there's no way I'm tracking and I don't have the money for a registered dietitian, would be to just go, look at nutrient dense eating patterns, like go look at, what Nutrivore is about. It is a dietary philosophy, not a diet itself. There's no foods that are restricted or forbidden, so that we make room for all foods on Nutrivore, but it helps to identify those foods that supply the essential nutrients that we need so we don't have those nutrient shortfalls. So it's about improving diet quality in a way that we still get joy from our diet, so that it's sustainable, so that it's a healthy eating pattern and not a thing we do for short-term gain at the expense of long-term health.
I love that. Thank you so much, Dr. Sarah.
Thank you.